So this lecture is about the stomach. So then in the stomach, food is agitated, broken down, and mixed with what are called gastric juices, which are secreted by glands of the stomach. And this produces a soupy mixture that is called chyme. So once food has been in your stomach for a while, it is known as chyme. It will remain known as chyme for quite a while. Okay, so getting on then to the gross anatomy of the stomach. First of all, the stomach is kind of a J-shaped organ. So let's draw this over here then. All righty. So let's do this. Here we have the stomach. Okay, so as I said, a somewhat J-shaped organ. And then up at the top here, we have this item there, which is known as the gastroesophageal sphincter. Okay, so let's talk about sphincter muscles. Sphincters then are muscles that are circular, and they squeeze down to prevent fluids from going backwards in a tube. Now, unfortunately, the gastroesophageal sphincter is just what's known as a physiological sphincter, that is to say, a little bit of a thickening there, so it kind of squeezes down and it kind of prevents food from backing up, but frankly, not all that well. We have other more powerful sphincters in our bodies that do a better job. But anyway, here we have the gastroesophageal sphincter, which means that what happens is that when food winds up going through the esophagus, here we have the end of the esophagus, it passes through that sphincter, through that opening into the stomach, and when things go well, then that opening closes so that you do not wind up having food going back up into the esophagus. Unfortunately, this is far from a perfect system. So here we have the gastroesophageal sphincter, also known sometimes as the cardiac sphincter. Which, as I said, can and sometimes does close to prevent what is known as reflux or backing up. Okay, so here we have the gastroesophageal sphincter. Then we have this area roughly in here that is known as the cardia. And this then is the boundary between the greater and lesser curvatures of the stomach. Now we have this little area right in here, which I'm indicating with these parallel lines here. And this then is known as the fundus. So that then is the bulge of the greater curvature that is superior to the esophageal junction. Okay, now to fully explain this, I should explain that the stomach is described as having two curves. Here's a curve here, kind of a small one, as you can see. So this curve here then is known as the lesser curvature. So the lesser curvature is this curvature here. And here you see this really remarkably large curve that I'm indicating with a wavy line. The wavy line doesn't exist in real life. But this then is the greater curvature of the stomach, while this one is the lesser curvature. And so then the fundus is this bulge in the greater curvature that actually goes above the gastroesophageal sphincter. Okay, then at the other end, down here, roughly about here, we have this structure here, which is the pyloric sphincter. And this is what allows food chyme, that is, to go from your stomach into this next piece of your GI tract here, which is the small intestine. But it allows it through only in sort of very regulated doses in a small trickle. So then, to carry on, this area all in here, where I'm going to indicate with these lines here, this is what is known as the body of the stomach on the outside. And then where you get this narrowing, in here, this is known as the pylorus, which then ends with the pyloric sphincter. And that then is how the stomach looks when you see it from the outside, plus the two sphincters as well. So what I am going to do now, however, is talk about what we see on the inside of the stomach. So then within the stomach, what you will then wind up seeing, if you were to just slice the stomach open, here's the stomach again, and you were to simply take a slice right through it like that, what you would see in the wall, the interior wall of the stomach, are a bunch of folds that I'm trying to indicate here like this. So you would see these folds in the interior of the stomach. So these folds then within the stomach then are called rugae. So these are longitudinal folds. Okay, so what does this do for us? First of all, this lends expandability, but it also, of course, increases surface area. And remember, the answer is nearly always surface area when you see a bunch of folding going on. And these rugae also contain what are called gastric pits. So the gastric pits then communicate with gastric glands. So basically what I'm saying is you have this fold like so, and then at the bottom you're going to have the gastric glands like this, and these gastric glands then make gastric juice. This is important for digestion. Here we have some fluids that will help in the breakdown of food. So then, in your gastric glands, gastric glands then have two kinds of cells. They have what are called parietal cells, and they have what are called chief cells. So the parietal cells then. These secrete, first of all, a substance known as intrinsic factor. And this helps your body to absorb vitamin B12. this is a peculiar thing about vitamins. It's not just a matter of what vitamins you take in through your diet. You also have to be able to absorb them, which is a peculiar chemical matter all to itself. And basically, without intrinsic factor, our bodies are incapable of absorbing vitamin B12 through our diet. You can still get it by way of a shot. This is why if you have had people who have had their stomachs removed, if they have had stomach cancer, for instance, this is why you then have to have people like that getting vitamin B12 shots, because without the stomach, there is no intrinsic factor, and without intrinsic factor, you can't absorb vitamin B12 through your diet. So, as I said, here we have the parietal cells that secrete intrinsic factor, and they also secrete hydrochloric acid, the abbreviation for which is, of course, HCl. And this creates an acidic environment in your stomach, which is a part of what can help digest things. It can basically make big proteins into little proteins. And it also then will stimulate your other cells, that is to say, your chief cells, these other cells in the gastric glands, and these then secrete what is called pepsinogen. Okay, now when you see gen or something like that, that means makes. So this is basically that chemical which will turn into the digestive enzyme pepsin. Pepsin is another protein breakdown or breaking down enzyme. So when you have pepsin in your stomach, you are capable of breaking down proteins to a large degree. You're not done yet, but you have basically, between the hydrochloric acid and the pepsin, you have wound up taking large protein molecules and making them into smaller protein molecules. And that is it then for the stomach.